We are on Facebook. And
not
don't
Instagram.
worry, Steve.
Not Instagram.
We are live on the gram. Steve, you should be able to see me.
I don't see it. Okay.
Looks like we're
see
going
it. Hold
to be...
on.
You got it?
I don't see it yet.
I see you.
It's a blank screen.
Steve, you should be able to But do you see me? Look at that.
Okay, all right. So today is Tech Tuesday. We're going to be talking about dual rate spring kits, single rate, everything that goes on to the shock. But you know who we got to go talk to, right? The man, the myth, the legend, Justin Smith.
He did it again. I don't know what I'm going to have to do to keep him from
He's got to fire me at this point.
You may, maybe a bone. Maybe if I can, I might bribe you to get Chase fired.
Oh, done.
Yeah, easy.
Later, Tater.
This is like blackmail now. We can't be doing
Goodbye.
this.
Someone's got to get this done because you keep lingering.
Entrapment.
Is that a smelly joke?
Yeah.
You keep lingering?
Yeah.
Did you put deodorant on today?
I did, Steve. I even showered.
Let's check it. Come on.
Let's see what you got.
Sniff
Hold on.
test.
Now I'm going to do my test, right? Steve, get in here.
No.
Get
I have
next
to
your
see.
hand. Ready first?
I have to see in the light.
Get it out quick. Smell it.
Is it
1,
warm?
2, 3, go.
It doesn't smell bad.
Arms up.
He's
Arms up.
He's
Let's
not
see
even.
what you got.
He's got a little bit of
Just
sweat.
because you got precipitation does not mean that you don't like the vacation that's underneath here.
That's so sad.
That's disgusting.
Hey, but it's a lot better than the last time. You're improving. Thanks a lot. Was it 3 T-shirts to cover that up? Or
You know, it's usually 2.
People are telling say they smell you through it. So you stink.
It's smell-o-vision on
Smell-o-vision. Smell-a-phone.
I did brush my cheeklets, Mike Dubs. You're welcome.
All right, so let's skip past Chase for a second. He would love it if the whole episode was about him.
We could do one of those.
Would. But no, it's actually Tech Tuesday, and today's tech is going to be coil spring science. All the little details about coil spring design and how that leads into spring rates, how it affects your ride quality, and dual rate springs, some of the formulas for that, and what all these manufacturers of springs have to go through and how that compares to maybe some of the stock springs that we love to hate. But coil springs. Coil springs are basically a torsion bar that's been wrapped into a circle. So what a lot of people don't understand is that a coil spring doesn't actually just compress like you expect a slinky or something from childhood like that would do. A coil spring, actually, all of that wire that's wrapped around in that spring is twisting and rotating. So imagine a coil spring if you could take the coil and go completely straight and wind it out perfectly straight and look right down the end of it. Now you basically have a sway bar or torsion bar in my hand, and it is twisting this direction. That is how the wire
Chase,
itself,
don't do it. Chase, you be quiet.
Can you slow that down and do it from the side angle over here?
Yeah, I'm not going to give you that one.
Chase, you
You're not
stop
going to edit that together. But imagine a torsion bar straight down, and it's twisting, giving you resistance to the system. You now take that twistable torsion bar and wind that into a spring. That's how springs react. They're actually twisting the wire itself on a rotational force. If you take a look up here, trying to kind of show you how if you were to cut this in half and you could look straight down the wire itself, the wire is actually rotating. Another thing to think about, do you need to fix that?
We're fine. We're good on Instagram. Looks like we just lost Facebook. We're
you
recording
fix
again.
that.
We're good. Keep going.
Another thing to think about is what happens to a torsion bar when you twist it. Well, it actually gets shorter because you're putting more material into a smaller spot. Actually, it's the other way around. You're actually stretching it. But imagine if you take a towel that's wet from getting out of the shower and you're trying to wring it out. As you take that towel that's this long and you wring it, it gets tighter and tighter. It gets closer and closer. The same thing happens with a torsion bar. As you twist it, it gets shorter. We'll now take that and put it into a coil spring and twist everything. It gets shorter. That's how a spring compresses. This direction and this direction is a length or relaxing of the twist, allowing it to compress or extend. Most people don't know that. Hopefully I've blown your mind, at least maybe a couple people, giving you a little bit of a light bulb on that one. But that's how springs work and react. So when you're creating a spring, a couple things that are super important. One, Spring design is number one. A close second, if not number one, is the material that you're using, because you want to have the highest quality material that isn't going to fail over time. Also, the wire diameter. Those three things, the design, the diameter, and the material itself, are going to give you actual spring rate. What do you got, Chase?
You're blowing a lot of...
People are like, they're like, I need a drink. My mind is blown. Like,
There you go.
I can't do this.
Good. At least we can get that done once a month with what we actually talk about.
And Steve O'Knievel, one of our locals, did say he said, I'm so lost.
Already? All
Yes.
Right. Well, we'll get to this.
So we'll wrap it back up for him.
Yeah, exactly.
You might get into this later in the session here, Justin, but there are a couple questions asking, why do we not disclose our spring rates? Like, why do we not tell people what the spring rates are on certain vehicles or at all?
Real simple. We put a ton of effort and time into figuring out what works, and we're not going to give it away for free. So if you want, you can figure out what springs work perfect on your car. Just go buy different rates. I don't know, 20 different springs and try them all. It's very expensive. It's time consuming. So we keep that close to the chest because it is important for us to do. Also, we're protecting the time and R&D that we have in that kit. And nobody can, you can't yell at us for that. Or you might, but we're not going to listen.
You can.
We're not going to pay attention if you actually yell about that. No. It's the same exact thing as Microsoft coming up with a computer program that allows your computer to work 10 times faster. They're going to protect it because they spent billions of dollars developing it. They're not going to just tell you how to download it for free.
We'll give you the chip. We just can't, tell you how we made it.
Yeah, we'll give you our experience in a box so that you don't have to play with it and figure it out over months and months and months. How's that? You like that?
No, I do like that.
That just rolled off my tongue.
It was great, but there's a comment,
Experience in a
speaking
box.
of rolled off your tongue.
Yeah.
One of the guys, Mega Desert Diesel, said, OMG. With some witty editing and voiceover, some parts of the video could make Justin famous on some dark sites. All the elongated, twisting motions.
So Chase, that's why Chase over here is half chub right this second. I can
Yep,
see it.
we're gonna-
Standing a little close to me, he's poking me in the leg.
We're going to start your OnlyFans today, Justin.
All right, so back to, now that I've mentioned how a spring works, let's go to the list. Up here at the top, number one, let's go with material choice. So high tensile steel, specifically in a chromium silicon combination. Most spring manufacturers, there's about 20 different grades of spring material. Most quality spring manufacturers are going to use the highest grade. We request only the highest grade in anything that we actually have made for us. All of our springs are made in the US. We do have multiple manufacturers in multiple states so that they can keep up, but the criteria that we ask of our spring is the same. So they actually have to follow that QC process. So we know we're getting the same exact thing. Same as what the military does when they have multiple contractors for the same part on the shuttle. They know it's exact because they've given them criteria they have to follow. Yes, Steve?
No, it's just funny. Someone said, I feel bad for your guys' HR guy.
What HR guy?
Yeah, that person quits. They're new every week.
Yeah.
So high tensile chrome silicon material is standard issue with us. It's the highest grade we could possibly buy. Good design. Good design is super important. If you don't have a good engineered design in the coil spring, that is the number of coils, the length of the system, the wire diameter of the coil, and also overall travel. So the amount of gap between coils so that when you compress a spring 10 inches, it doesn't go to bind. Those overall things in design can extend or create the spring's life. Also stops it from sagging or settling. If the material is right and the design is right, then you don't have those issues. In addition, twist, bind, and coil diameter. So how do you create a rate? Well, imagine back to where I started. This will make the dark web happy again. Long rod in my hand.
I'm sprung.
That is basically a torsion bar. So as you twist that, you have resistance. That is a rate, that's spring rate. So you can go larger diameter, and that twist is going to be stiffer. That would be a higher spring rate. Let's just say you go from 1 inch to 1 1/4. That might go from, and this isn't technically accurate, but it could be 500-pound rate, might go up to 750-pound rate by changing that diameter. Same thing happens in a coil spring, but we do it in thousandths of an inch. So the wire diameter or coil diameter on a lot of these springs are anywhere from 400 thousandths to 560 thousandths in diameter. and 5 to 10 thousandths of an inch in diameter will change the rate as much as 50 pounds. It could be less, could be 20 pounds. Go ahead.
What about variable rate springs? Are they beneficial for off-road?
So variable rate, you know, I should probably get into that at the end when we're talking about dual rates. But in general, variable rate spring is going to have tightly wound coils at the top and a much more spread out coil system at the bottom. That gives you different spring rates as it's compressed, and that's mainly design of the spring. But I'll get into the benefits and not so much benefit of that at the end.
Justin, how do you test the spring rates to make sure they are the quality that you guys want?
Okay, so testing is done by two people. One, our spring manufacturer. They are required to test and document certain amounts of springs throughout a batch. We verify that here in the shop with our own spring rater, and I'll take you over to that spring rater a little bit later and show you how to rate a spring. But it's very, very simple if you have a good spring rater. So back to diameter. You can go larger diameter wire would give you a stiffer spring. More wire typically is going to be the same as having a torsion bar that's longer, and it gets softer spring rates by doing that. But more wire means more coils means less travel. Less travel means it could bind early, and that's a negative. So that's where design comes in. You want the right amount of coil, you want the right amount of gap for travel, you want the right material, and you want the right diameter of material, all of which combine to give you spring rate. So I'm going to move on unless you have something very eloquent to say, Steve. About length of rods and stuff.
I do have a lot to say, but I'm going to keep it simple real quick.
Okay.
This is actually a question that I've never heard before, but it makes sense. Are spring wires always round? Have you ever experimented with a different shape? Could you have a non-round spring?
Actually, you can. You can. Round typically is the longest lasting because it does not have stress points. So for instance, if it was an octagon shape or hexagon shape, every one of those little points is a stress riser since everything is twisting and you can have a crack there. There are square or rectangular material that's wound into a coil, and that would be called a tender or helper spring, where they're actually designed to be bound. And those do not twist. Those actually compress like you expect. It's technically a wave spring where you're stretching the material as it compresses. It does not twist. And those are the only ones that are designed to go to full bind and not damage themselves. Anything else in the round department or twisting like we're talking about, if it goes to bind, it'll break. Eventually. Maybe not right away. All right. So you've got coils diameter, you got bind to worry about, you've got twist to think about, overall design, number of coils, all create rate. So good design and good material, stress relieved ASAP. This is super important, and a lot of spring manufacturers don't do this, and this is something that is a good reason why stock springs have issues. Stress relieving. When you take a coil and heat it up so that it can be wrapped around a mandrel turned into a spring, when you do that, you create or put stress into that material because it was straight, now it's coiled, and as it's coiled up, it's got more stress on the inside edge of it, a little less stress on the outside of those coils, and it might get hotter or colder as it's wrapped around the mandrel to create a spring. So if you just leave that alone, then you create stress spots in the system, and you can have failures in the spring later on down the road. Now, within 15 minutes or so, you have to stress relieve that spring. So all of the springs that we have made are immediately wound onto a mandrel, and they're hot, and then they go into an oven where the temperature is brought up to a mean temp where the whole spring is the same temp instead of hot and cold, and then it's brought down slowly in a controlled manner, which takes all the molecules inside those windings and bar that are bound up because they've been wound around a mandrel, and relaxes all those molecules and takes away the stress risers. That is something that most manufacturers do not do. All of our springs are done that way. That is one of the reasons why we just don't have springs break, and we don't have springs settle and sag over time like the factory ones do. Now, our springs are brand new, so they're going to take a set one time when you put them on your car, maybe the first 200 miles, but once they've done that, they won't take a set or settle any more than that, unless you put too much weight on the car, which most people do, and they wonder why it's so slow. But it has nothing to do with spring quality. Our quality is high. As a matter of fact, probably the highest. Next, ground flat. So this is a tolerance that you can tell the spring manufacturers to give you. Ours are ground flat to a degree of 2 degrees. Now, what's that mean? That means that when the bottom of the spring is actually sanded flat for a flat surface and the top, it's ground to within 2 degrees of straight. So anything that's got more than 2 degrees of lean to it when it's sitting on a gauge is thrown out. It doesn't make our quality control, and that way we keep springs as straight as possible, very little bowing, things like that. What is industry standard? About 5 to 6 degrees is an industry standard. So you can buy a brand new one, put it on the table, it's going to lean over 5 or 6 degrees, and that's acceptable to the majority of the industry, not for us. We narrow it down to 2 degrees, which is really, really high tolerance. Steve?
Justin, what is the life expectancy of a spring?
That is variable according to what you're using it for. So on a play car, lifetime. On a race car, 2-3 years. It has to do with cycles, and it has to do with full cycles. So you can sit there and move the spring an inch for 1,000,000 times. It's not going to fail the spring. But if it's a 10-inch compressed spring and you move it full 10 inches and all the way out, then you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 million cycles. So how many times do you fully compress your spring and extend it is the question I should ask you. But layman's terms, lifetime on play cars and 2-3 years on big race car stuff. Mitch, you got anything before I keep going?
No, that was actually the one question that I was going to ask.
All right. Now, if you don't have the tolerances in the material and the design that we have in our springs, that's going to be a lot quicker. You may not be able to make it a year on a race car, or you may not be able to make it 2 years on a play car. Just depends. So, 2 degree tolerance, super tight tolerance on our springs. After that, they are shot peened. Now, shot peening extends the life of the spring as much as 700 times. Not 7 times more life, 700 times longer. What is shot peening? Well, you know what sandblasting is. You can blast sand into something to maybe clean paint off of it or whatever. Well, shot peening is using different media to actually pound the surface of the spring, creating a hardened surface, because you've got, say, metal media or some other style of media that's actually going metal on metal, and it compresses the molecules of the outside of that spring, gets rid of scale, gets rid of rough edges, and under a microscope, it gets rid of microscopic cracks because it actually pounds those cracks shut in a way, or takes the highs and the lows and equals them out, which, back to you, Steve, is less stress risers in a piece of material that is twisting, so less potential for a crack to start and failure over time. So shot peening is huge to life expectancy, and it is a standard issue for our springs. Also gives a really cool surface, a smooth surface, when it comes to powder coating as well. But life of the spring is what we care about. Spring rates are held to within 3%, and that's measured at mid-stroke. I know I'm getting Chase excited again, talking more about rods and stroke and stuff like that. I apologize, Chase.
Do you have a hand example for that?
Back down. So, example for that. Most spring rate tolerances are anywhere from 5 to 8%. So if it is a 100-pound spring, then they give that the okay if its spring rates or rates out 7 pounds under. 93 pounds on that spring, it would pass because they would still call that a 100-pound rate. Okay, we have a 3% tolerance. So only 3 pounds on a 100-pound spring will we allow before we actually throw that spring away. So ours are really, really high tolerance. Now, when you start dealing with 500-pound springs, it's a lot. So, 10% is 50 pounds, 7%, 40 pounds. So we don't want to have that kind of variance in our stuff. Ours is really, really accurate. Also, it's measured mid-stroke. The reason it's measured mid-stroke is because, Chase, the first inch of compression and
it's all that matters is the first inch
of compression are thrown out and not measured by the industry. That is standard issue. The reason is the first inch of compression is actually always going to be less spring rate than the rest of the travel of the spring.
Justin, I measure every inch.
You have to.
You have to measure every inch.
I know. Chase is adding inches.
What do you mean the first inch doesn't matter?
Stretching it out, and he's compressing the tape measure. But it is the first and the last inch are important because you have to know that is a no man's land when it comes to rate. the first compressed inch is less rate than the spring actually will be. The last compressed inch is more rate than the spring will actually be. So all spring rates are checked past the first inch, somewhere in the mid-stroke, Chase, where the meat and potatoes happen, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, he's over here mountaintop.
Yeah, so he's salivating right now.
So all spring rates are measured somewhere in the middle stroke of the spring to get rid of the first and last inch that are definitely throwaway areas and not accurate. And that is industry standard. And I'm going to go back to that because when you start putting springs on cars and you're only putting an inch of preload in it, you're still inside that area where the spring hasn't gathered the rate it's supposed to be. So that's why you have variance when it comes to the amount of preload that will get you what the ride height is that we suggest or what you expect. It's very, very hard to do and actually next to impossible to do, but we're going to revisit that. First inch is too low, last inch is too high. Spring rate is measured in pounds per compressed inch. So if you've got a coil spring that's 10 inches long and it is a 100-pound spring and you compress it 1 inch, then you would have gained 100 pounds of force. If you compress it 2 inches, that is another 100 pounds. So now you have 200 pounds on it. You compress it 3 inches, that's another 100 pounds. So you have a total of 300 pounds force on that. It's not exponential. So the first inch is 100, the second inch is 200 pounds an inch, the next one's 400 pounds. That's not how it works. It's 100 pounds for every single inch you compress it. Steve,
I'm just laughing at
I know you are.
I'm just laughing at 100 pounds per inch because I'm thinking about Matt over here. That's all I got. That's definitely 100 pounds per inch for sure.
Good sport.
We didn't forget about you, Matt.
So, next, dual rate. So, dual rate system, simply put, is going to be stacking springs. You're going to have a spring on top, a divider to separate the two springs, and you're going to have a spring on the bottom. So, upper, lower spring, dual rate system. Dual springs, hopefully 2 different rates that could be the same rates. But what we get a lot of questions about is, hey, you sent me a spring kit and the upper spring is the same part number as the lower spring. So you must have screwed up because you didn't send me a dual rate spring kit. Well, that's actually not true. So the upper spring and bottom spring can be the same, and you are getting different spring rates as you go from combining both springs together to where you contact the crossover ring and get into the lower spring only. And I have examples of that on the board. Steve.
Justin, do you think Chase is an upper spring or a bottom spring?
Chase is definitely a bottom spring, don't you think?
First off,
I think he's a bottom spring.
Chase, how does that crossover taste?
Oh, man.
I was always under the impression I was a divider, to be honest.
You do go both ways. I get it. Yes, that's cool.
Yeah, that's true. So back to dual rates. We're going to use examples. That's funny stuff, Steve. We're going to use examples on springs as 200-pound springs. So here's the formula to allow you to do your own math at home. So to create or find out what the spring rate is of a combined upper and lower spring, you take the top spring times the bottom spring. These are rates. So top spring, I'm going to show you an example of, say, 200-pound spring. So 200-pound upper times the bottom, 200-pound lower, divided by the upper plus the lower. All right? So what's 200 times 200 is 4,000, right? So 4,000 divided by 400. Here's your math. 200 upper, 200 lower equals 100-pound combined. Now, we're going to do more math. I'm going to show you it's not simply just cut the thing in half. It's not that. You do have to use the formula. But if you have a 200-pound upper and a 200-pound lower, you don't have a dual rate problem. Like people call us and ask us why we do that. You have dual rate. You have a 100-pound combined rate between both when they're functioning at ride height. And as soon as you compress this far enough for the spring, lower spring to get into the crossover, it jumps from 100 pounds to the 200-pound lower spring rate. So 200 over 200 goes from 100 to 200 pounds as it compresses. Yes, Steve?
From Germada Worm 76. Why do you use a crossover exclusively? Why not a variable rate spring option with the same specs so the crossover ring rubbing is not an issue?
So here's the reason. I'll get back to variable spring rate or a multi-wound design spring giving you multiple spring rates. It's a very expensive spring to design, and as you start getting into spring lengths that are longer than 16 inches into 18s and 20s, then the design of the spring is not strong enough to support the middle of the spring. As you compress a spring that long, it bows and rubs on the shock body. So you want to try and keep spring lengths under 18 inches. And if you have a single spring trying to travel 12 to 14 inches, for instance, like the back of an X3, you can't physically design enough windings and coils into an 18-inch spring to travel 14 inches without going into bind. So, one, packaging and design restrictions with the travel that we're running in UTVs. Second, engineering and design of the spring is very expensive, and the manufacturers are always looking into that, and so are we. You know, we might have a spring that costs $75 that we can do a dual rate system with. A variable spring like that can cost $185 and triple the cost of the spring kit. So that's the reason why we don't do that. Also, you are stuck with exactly the rates that spring is designed to give you at exactly the time in compression that spring is designed to give you. With a dual rate system, we can adjust it and change when it engages with crossover ring, and it's cheaper. So all in all, a dual rate system with crossover is better and more tunable and cheaper. So there you go. Back to rates. So 200 over 200 is 100-pound combined. It jumps into a 200-pound rate when you compress that thing a lot farther. So as you hit a big hit or a big jump, you get into the heavier lower spring because you've jumped off of a dual rate spring into a single. Let's just change this up a little bit. What if it's a 200 over 300? Okay, well, if you do the math, upper times lower divided by upper plus lower equals 120-pound rate. That combined rate between a 200 and 300 is 120 pounds an inch, so that's what you feel at ride height. And after you jump it and land it and compress it into the crossover, then it jumps into a 300-pound lower spring. If that's something that you can control without bucking, like from a rebound standpoint, then great. This is a good riding system and it's very progressive. Let's just take this 200, 300 and switch it. Now you got a 300 on top, you got a 200 on the bottom. This is typical. I'm more East Coast, I think, in snowmobile than it is anywhere in the off-road industry out here. But that's still a 120-pound rate. The math is the same. Still the same spring rates, right? 120 here, 120 here. But when you hit a big hit, it jumps to a 200-pound lower instead of a heavier 300. So you go from 120 to 200 instead of 120 to 300. Now, that might work good for you, or it might bottom out. It just depends on the geometry of the car, how you drive, which UTV it is. We've found cars that work out really well with less lower spring. Like an XP 1000 four-seater does not like a ton of lower spring as soon as you jump it into something. It likes a lot lighter spring. So that system is one we've actually tuned that way on purpose because geometry-wise, it's hard to control it. One more, just for funsies, and we like to have lots of funsies around here, Chase says. So, well, let's try and kind of knock something in the middle of these, right? How about a 250 over 250? Remember, this is dual rate because the combined rate is 125 pounds. And as soon as you land that sucker and get into the lower spring, it's 250. So this might be a pretty good happy medium if you were at 2 over 3 and the thing bucks when you land the car. You can't control the rebound because of the heavy lower spring. You go and flip the springs around and you made it a 200-pound lower instead of a 300-pound lower. Now it bottoms out everywhere. Well, it might be a good choice to go to 250, 250 and just increase the ride height spring rate just a little bit, but land that lower spring right in the middle of those two and see if it doesn't bottom out. Steve.
Somebody did ask a question and it just kind of got brought up again. Someone asked earlier in the feed, what about a triple rate system? So like on the 2-seat rears of an X3, it does have 3 springs, so it has a top tender. Is that considered a triple rate spring?
It is. Well, the factory system on the X3, the upper spring is actually a helper spring. Doesn't really have any rate to it. So it's not giving you the benefits of a triple rate system. It literally is sitting there just to take up the gap. When that spring package is fully extended, normally it would rattle and it would bounce off the shock and not be tight on the preload collar. That's the reason why they did that. And that was because of spring design. They designed the springs not to travel that far in the factory system, and since they didn't travel that far, they get loose when it's drooped out, so they have a helper spring to keep that gap up. So to answer your question, yeah, it's 3 springs, but that upper doesn't have any rate to it, so it's actually not a triple rate. Is a triple rate beneficial? You're splitting hairs here, because you can really tune dual rate to a point where you're dealing with, 5-pound changes in combined rates. When you start doing triple rate, then you're dealing with like 1-pound changes in triple rate, and you can't feel it. No one can feel a pound. Only a shock dyno does. So we don't mess with those too much. It's more effort than it's worth.
Mr. Sparkles here. I believe spring rates is one of the dark arts.
Yeah, black box of springs.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you got, Mitch?
Triple Digit Sketch wants to know, how do you decide which is the best rate for individual customers?
So great question. The only thing I can tell you is that we do a ton of testing. Literally, we test every single day. And we will take a car that we're happy with and we'll overweight it and drive it. We'll underweight it and make it too light and drive it. We'll drive it slow, we'll drive it fast, we'll be aggressive, we'll drive like Chase's grandmother. I mean, Chase like a grandma is what I meant to say.
Hey, he's a great driver.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
So we drive all those styles. We'll have a ton of our guys come out and drive with their styles, and we will change rates according to different driving styles and have that documented. And if long as you're honest with us on how you drive, then we probably have a setup for that. But springs don't typically control driving style. Springs are pretty much controlling the geometry of the car and the weight that's on the car. Internal shock valving and how it's valved is more about your driving style. So springs in a little way, internal valving a lot affects, is mostly the affected thing on driving style.
Justin, I've seen this question almost 7 times now, so that is why I'm going to ask you, because they're blowing us up. Shock therapy tuned Velocity Turbo S versus shock therapy Dynamics Turbo S. Is there a difference?
Yeah, I'd say the Dynamics tuned system over the Walker tuned system is probably 35% better. Riding quality, you can drive it harder, it feels softer, it doesn't bottom out. It's a better system in our opinion once they're both tuned. Would you agree with that, Mitch?
Yeah.
Car for car.
Turbo S Dynamics for sure.
Would you also say 30%, or would you go a little less than that or more?
I would go more, honestly.
more.
I'd say like 40 to 50% better in my opinion.
All right, well, I'm being conservative.
Yeah.
Then there you go. Steve?
Somebody just asked, just ordered a spring kit for my X3. What is the turnaround time right now, Justin? Did we say 3 days?
Yeah, right now it's 3 to 5 shipping days.
Okay.
The reason is that we're kind of overwhelmed in shipping and behind. We have the stuff in stock, don't worry about that, and we'll get to it as fast as we possibly can. The guys are shipping about 120 boxes a day right now, and they can't keep up. So we'll get to it as fast as possible. If it's going to take more than that, we'll definitely let you know.
Nathan Clark, I'm going to go ahead and state his statement here, but I'm going to exchange the exclamation point for a question. Justin, you are the man, brother?
He is also the myth. He is also the legend.
And am I the man?
You're the man.
Maybe. According to Steve, I am.
You are.
So back to the list. We've talked about dual rate. We talked about how you figure that out. We've also explained to you guys that it's okay to have the same spring top and bottom. It still is dual rate. And yes, they are different rates. But you can manipulate that 10 different ways from Sunday and change it to be specific to how you drive in your car's geometry and weight. Last, nailing preload and ride height is almost impossible. You will always have to make adjustments to spring systems. Now, that doesn't mean always, but it means most of the time. Now, let me go back to what we talked about. Springs are not even rated by any spring manufacturer or in any quality control environment in the first inch of compression. What if you take a spring, dual rate spring, upper and lower, and you put preload into that system, you put 1.5 inches of preload into that system. That might be what we suggest. That might be a starting point for our spring kit that we give you to start from. But that means that 2 springs are sitting at 1.5 inches of preload. That means that both springs are sitting within that 1 inch of throw it out there, it does not count spring rate zone. And if you don't have accurate spring rates in the first inch, you can't get accurate ride heights when you're under 2 inches of preload. Now, we don't want to have cars with 2 inches of preload or more. that typically tells us that our spring systems are too light and needs more rate. So just the fact that we live on almost all UTVs and almost every spring kit within that no man's zone of spring rates can be anything that they want to be in that 1 inch of preload means that a perfect setup on one car that nails the ride height, we can take the same car with another set of springs and it may not be the same ride height. We can take the same springs and put them on a different car and they might be a different ride height. So for us to say, hey, you're going to get 17 inches of ground clearance with this much preload, it is a very educated guess. It's going to be the 50%, I would say, here in our shop when we install spring kits. We nail it about 50% of the time. The other 50%, you have to give it to the 1 inch of no man's land of spring rate that you're in, and it just might require more adjustments. 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, as much as 3/4 of an inch, no problem, up and down. It doesn't bother us or worry us that we didn't get the spring system right. It's just that it's sitting in that area that we don't know what the rates are. Steve.
Now, Justin, I just want to touch on that a little bit too. So there's a difference between preload and actual preload. So just because you add 2 inches, there could be zero actual preload when it leaves this shop, or there could be barely any preload. So I just want to touch on that because if someone did add 2 inches to a shock, it actually could be okay. Because when it leaves this shop, it might not actually have a lot of actual preload.
This is very true. So let me show you what Steve's talking about here.
What are you drawing, Justin?
This is the top of a shock. I'm sorry.
Top of a what, Justin? Top of a what, Justin?
That helped you out in the shorts there, Chase.
Looks
but
like
you're
I
the
could-
only one with a dirty mind, sir.
Oh, he said
Looks
top
like-
of a shock. Sorry, I thought I heard something else.
Looks
So
like something
there's-
I could buy at the castle.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you doing that, yes. Okay, so there's a top of a shock, threaded body, preload collar, and coil spring on it. A lot of people think that this distance from here to here is preload. Just this open area that's showing. Okay, that is not true at all. That is not preload. Because what if this spring system, if you just raise this up a 1/2 inch, what if the spring system all of a sudden became loose? What preload is the difference between when the spring is soft and actually loose on the shock, and then how far down you ran this collar. That is preload. It could be 1 inch. It could be 1/2 inch to start with, and then you put another inch in it, which would give you a total of 1.5 inches. It is not how much shock body is showing. And a lot of people do not understand that. And they call us and go, I got 4 inches of preload in my car. No, you don't. You have 4 inches of shock body that's showing. You may have 0 preload on the spring. You might have 1 inch of preload on the spring. So when people call us back and they're like, I got 1 inch, it must be wrong. Nope. Could be exactly right. It might actually have 1 inch preload in it now that you put 1 inch in it. So we have all of our spring systems are set up in different ways, and you have to really trust that we've been here and we've done that, and we actually know what we're talking about when it comes to these. We sell thousands and thousands and thousands of spring kits, probably 10,000 spring kits last year. Out of all of those, we had to send another pair of springs to 5 guys, ever. It's actually pretty ridiculous that we nail it as many times as we do. Steve.
Justin, you are usually a hell of an artist. We do have a lot of comments asking if that is the actual preload area, and is that ribbed for her pleasure?
You know what? It is the preload area,
Okay.
but the question is it ribbed for your pleasure?
Oh, God, Justin.
I'm right back at you.
I need to go outside.
It's getting uncomfortable.
I need to go
now.
outside.
It is. I know. I can't even stand myself. Hey, Ernie. Mitch, you got anything good?
No, just a couple like off questions. How much more would it cost manufacturers to add quality springs for stock?
That's a really good question. Probably $25 to $30 per spring, and there's 8 of them on a car. So whatever that adds up to is $200.
Well, and also they have to go through regulations too, correct?
Yeah, that's true. So I was going to put $200 per car on there, which by the time that retails out to the customer, it's probably $500 more per car. Maybe more. What do you got?
We got a live one, and he looks like he's working hard, man. Where are you at? What are you working on, and what are you driving when you're not working?
I got a 19 XP4. And I've noticed that ever since I got my rig, my preload spring is super compressed.
Yep.
So I barely have any space. My ride is super rough. What can I do to improve that on the stock springs?
So there's absolutely nothing you can do on the stock spring to improve it. That's going to continue to get more and more sacked out. It's going to get more and more compressed as it fails, and then eventually it'll break the spring after time. The only thing you can do is change the spring kit completely to a really good dual rate kit that doesn't use that short upper spring. That's one of the reasons why we're in business, because that car factory is designed that way, and it's a poor design, but it allowed them to get through some government regulations and tests. We understand why they did it, but it's not going to go away. Your problem's going to continue, so buy a spring kit.
Yeah, every time I'm riding, let's say Crown King or even sand, when we go to the cinders, super, super bumpy. I end up with a headache at the end of the ride. It's super uncomfortable. My brother has the Turbo S 2-seater, and I can see his tires actually moving. My car is shaking. His tires are only moving. So.
Yeah, it's because you're riding on the stiff lower spring all the time, so the ride quality's got to be horrible. But get a new spring kit, it's going to be night and day. Like 50% improvement in your car's ride quality on that car if you do that.
Now, the second question, would it be something that I have to send all the shocks to you guys, or would I be able to do it? I'm a mechanic.
You can buy a spring kit from our website. We'll ship it to you, and we have full instructions on how to install it. It's really easy, especially since you are a mechanic.
Right, right. We got all the equipment here.
All you gotta do is watch our instructions from start to finish. Don't hit pause and skip the middle. Watch the whole thing, and it will become very easy for you.
Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you. Love you guys.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. T-shirt, color, and size. We'll get it to you.
Send it in our direct message.
All right. Thank you guys.
What do you got, Mitch?
Bryce Beckman said 200% increase in ride quality saved my marriage.
Oh yes, marriage savers are us. I love that one. Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Introduce me on Thursday as marriage saver, please. No man, myth, legend.
Can it be the man, the myth, the legend, and now a marriage saver, Justin Smith?
Okay, I'll take marriage saver, and hopefully you can cut the middle out of the
Okay,
rest of it.
I'll think about
Okay,
it.
what do you got?
Oh, wait, I got
We
another
got a
one.
live one.
Yes, we do.
So we
Apparently.
got-
See you, John.
What's
What are you
going on?
driving? Where you at? And what's going on, brother?
I'm in Flagstaff,
Sorry,
Arizona.
making fun of Chase there.
Snowing outside. Look at that.
Holy cow, hell yeah.
Nice. Thanks for the weather report.
Yeah, of course. So my question is this: I have an XP4 turbo, and that top spring is compressed. So do I actually have dual rate, or is it single?
So technically it's dual rate because you have two springs. Reality is it's single because it's sitting there on the lower spring, or you're riding on the lower spring all the time.
Is that why it bugs?
Yeah, and again, it's designed that way. If you jump the car and it's fully extended, then yeah, you're on, both springs are being used. It's kind of dual rate until it gets back to ride height and the upper is compressed again. Then you're just sitting on that heavy lower spring. So I guess the answer is it's dual rate when you're in the air. It's single rate from ride height or compressed farther.
Perfect. So 99% of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why you get a rough ride. So just buy a spring kit. Don't look at any of the spring kits that are just uppers either. A new upper, it's relying on a lower that's not straight. It's relying on a lower that's going to sag and settle, and then you end up with problems again. That's why we don't do just upper kits anymore. We do a full kit.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Shirt, color, and size for you and Flag.
Sounds like a plan.
Don't stop being a rock star dad.
Steve.
Jeff Ferguson, 98, said, Shock Therapy dual rate spring kit, best money I've spent. I don't know if that was a typo or he's saying double D's. I like it either way.
Double D spring kit.
Yeah, dual rate.
Nothing wrong with double D spring kit. I must say. Right, Chase?
Well, I mean, technically it's not my thing.
No, definitely not your thing.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. Matt, you want to share?
Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Twitch AZ says riding on the preload area will definitely buck you, so there's that.
Doing what, riding on the preload area?
Can you say it with some enthusiasm next time?
So I think what he means is riding with that upper spring completely compressed, right?
Steve, can we have you reinstate that question, please?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Matt Tonova.
Matt, sorry. Riding on the preload area will definitely buck you, so area, right?
Mr. Personality back there.
Yep.
All right.
I'm here all day.
So I've kind of gone over everything, but I'm going to revisit the beginning, the mind-blowing part. Okay, Three things go into the quality of a spring. The material that's chosen, we choose the best material made. The design of the spring is going to give it the longest longevity and least amount of settling or sagging over time. And wire diameter, also all three of those things combine to give you rate. And the design of the spring ultimately is giving you that final rate and overall travel. Now, how do springs work? They are not compressed like you see them compressing that simply. Technically, the wire diameter twists, and you take that wire diameter and wind it into a spring. The whole spring is twisting, which is causing it to compress and extend in overall length. That is why when you have a spring go to bind, they break, because they're trying to twist as they touch each other. They can't twist anymore, and those forces bind up into the spring and pop them. So that's why you see the uppers that are compressed all the time. The factory ones are broke because they aren't designed to go to bind, but they do. Yeah. So there you go.
Yes. Our BBL. I don't know what that is, but our customers are funny as hell. Somebody asked, how can I get less nosedive when braking? And then someone said, by not braking. I mean, that's
He's not wrong.
It's just perfect. And then Jeff Ferguson, the digital rate guy, he said, shout out to Justin from one former Arcadian to another.
What? Arcadia? What? Wow. Arcadia.
What is I want to know what my BBL is.
I don't know. BBL.
Big, beautiful
Lips.
lover,
lady?
I don't know. Lady?
I like S.E. Johnson 07. Is Matt ready to go back to his old job after being ripped on by you guys all day?
So, springs, if I zoom through the rest of this list, our quality control is extremely high. 2-degree tolerance on straightness, shot peened. Spring rates are held to a 3% or less variance. And basically, everything on here adds up to the highest quality spring ever made. We have them, lifetime guarantee, all made in the USA. Now you know how springs work, so you can try and design your own. Steve.
We figured out what BBL is. That's Brazilian butt lift, and I'm back to stock now.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yes. Mitch.
Whiskey Nick wants to know, can spring kits be picked up at your shop? If so, what is the lead time?
Absolutely. Spring kits can get picked up at our shop. You can even order it on the site like that if you want to. If you get to the shipping section, you can choose pick up in store, and they will be pulled and put up front for you to grab. You can save the shipping, and you can grab them right away. So usually same day. Unless you order it late in the afternoon, then it would be next day. But you can save that 3 to 5 day shipping by doing that too. That would be helpful. But we always have them in stock. That's for sure. We're never out. If you guys saw the other warehouse, you would understand. We're never out. You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb and piss off a bunch of people and say something that we have the most UTV springs in stock of anyone in the world. That is worldwide. That's Guinness Book right there. I'm going to call Guinness and have them show up. How many springs would you say that we have, Steve? You want to take a guess?
I would say probably. I mean, each box is
69,000.
Not even. I'd say close to like probably 200,000, maybe 300,000 springs.
You are low, sir.
Yeah. Oh, I say, is there more than that?
Yes,
okay, so 500 plus then. 500 plus thousand.
You are low.
1 million springs.
You are correct, sir.
We have 1 million springs.
Million springs in stock for UTVs. There might be somebody with more springs in stock, but they're for trucks and cars. They're not UTV based. So we are never out of springs when it comes to spring kits, you guys. And that is something we're very proud of. Steve.
We've had a couple of questions, which I'm not even going to talk about because you know what they are. But they did say they're watching.
Oh, they're watching.
They're watching.
What? What? Why would you be
I'm
watching?
told Speed UTV is watching.
Oh, I like that they're watching, of course.
too,
I mean, we have nothing but great things to say about it.
There's a lot of Speed UTV questions, which we just glazed over.
Can I cover all the Speed UTV
can you
questions
do it
right
real
now?
quick? Yeah.
Okay, let me do it. I have no idea what the questions were, but let me give it a shot. I don't know what to think of the Speed UTV. I have not driven one yet. I've seen all the videos, and I talk to Robbie quite often, and it should be amazing. I can't wait for it to come out. Can the shocks be improved that are on a Speed UTV? I don't know. More than likely, it's going to be pretty awesome because Robbie does know what he's doing, but You may not like the way it's set up for your driving style, and that's where we come in to tune it just for you. Steve, did I cover it all?
I think so, Justin. Now, we do have a question, I would say, for Mitchie.
Okay.
And it said, are we doing anything with the R-Max that you are leaning against? What is going on with the R-Max?
Well, come on over and take a look here, Chase. That is actually an R-Max sitting right there.
This looks like one of the greatest made cars of all time. Who makes this thing, Mitch?
I think it starts with a Y.
Wow. You mean to tell me that this is a Yamaha? What is this, a Wolverine, a Badger? What is it?
R-Max.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Badger, is that what you said?
Yeah, what are we doing to this thing?
We are actually testing it as we speak right now. So new spring kit designed for that. All the valving, we're going to test that. Make sure we like it all as far as that's concerned, and then we will have full kits for this car here in I'd say probably a month.
Yeah, give it a month. We'll have a full kit, spring and internal for this car.
How do you categorize this car, Mitch, and what do you expect to get out of it when you're done?
Utility?
Yeah, it's more utility. So I'm going to say a lot of people who maybe like to go hunting can have the ability to throw stuff in the bed.
Compare it to a General, a Defender.
I'm hoping it's on the same level with it being a Yamaha.
Woohoo! Come on, oh yeah.
No, I think it'll be cool for the guys that are Yamaha fans and maybe want the same kind of feel as a General, but have that same style. So we'll see.
Hey, since we're kind of getting off the subject of springs, Chase, let's go walk this way. Let's take a look at what the guys are up to today. We got a Honda in the house and Brandon. Hi, Brandon. Hello. Hello. Just to take a look at some of the shipping that the guys are banging out. Just so you guys know, we knock out about 100, 120 boxes a day. We spring shocks, any other stuff. You guys are really just buried on knocking this stuff out. You see everything lined up. Matt over there going through all the invoices. Let's see, 1X3, 2X3, Smart Shock cars as well. XP over in the side, XP Turbo. Got an XP Pro. Let's see, we've got a really nice pre-runner over on the far side, 2-seat X3. And we've got another Honda XP, a Wildcat, and we've got one of our pre-runners right in front of you. We lovingly call the one on your left, Chase, P2, because that's pre-runner number 2.
Mitch's new car.
Yeah, Mitch loves this car. He used to be in love with the RS1, but now it's a... So, if you guys have any more questions, then this is your last 5 seconds to throw them out. Otherwise, I'm out of here and Steve can send it.
I say we just send it, Justin.
Okay, let's get out of here. Steve, do it.
So if you guys are looking to buy anything off the website, please visit us at www.shocktherapist.com. Or if you have any questions, call into the shop at 623-217-4959.
And you guys, I don't know what type of UTV I'm going to get, but eventually I'll get something